Major General William Rupertus, commanding officer of the 1st Marine Division, forecasted a rapid conclusion on Peleliu, believing the combined force and stores would secure the island in 96 hours. At order issuance, divisional quartermasters allocated 103,000 canteens of water, 7,100 pounds of M2 flamethrower fuel, and 12,000 bandages, believing reserves overmatched the task. 3 forward ammunition dumps stockpiled 35,000 rounds of .30-06 for each company, expecting minimal resupply delays. LST 661 and LST 714, positioned off Southwest Reef, carried a further 180,000 rations. The opening plan postulated expenditure rates consistent with prior Solomon Islands tempo. Rupertus's timeline estimated a 93-minute airfield seizure window, with the withdrawal of all opponent resistance projected by 240 minutes after the initial 0830 hours beach landing. Actual combat extended beyond 4,900 consecutive minutes on day 3 alone, with company-level estimates reporting 70% casualties among 1st Marines by 18th September. Within 122 minutes, the 3rd Battalion suffered consolidation behind static sand berms, with frontline effectives reduced to 122 of 296. The cumulative loss rate forced reallocation of platoon radio men, runners, and assistant gunners into rifleman squads. The rapid collapse of expected timelines exposed the underestimation of Japanese resistance intensity. Concrete pillboxes featured interlocked walls at 174 millimeters thickness, reinforced to withstand 4,000 pounds per square inch, paired with natural coral outcrops, doubling their effective ballistic integrity. Enemy Type 92 machine guns, shielded by stepped parapets, directed overlapping fields of fire at a velocity of 740 meters per second. Wind along the defensive line measured constant at 11 knots, carrying dust and smoke obliquely through 3-meter firing apertures. The approaches, flanked by pillboxes at 31-meter intervals, forced Marines to engage without armored cover over an exposed 150 yards expanse. The microclimate within pillbox interiors maintained 118 degrees Fahrenheit sustained temperatures and near saturating humidity, severely degrading the function of U.S. radios and optical sights. 1st Platoon men advanced 207 meters inland over 74 hours, expending an average of 440 M1 Garand rounds per rifle, 1,900 bar rounds per automatic rifleman, and 17 M2 flamethrower tanks for less than 105 meters of terrain gain. This cost surpassed prior Guadalcanal benchmarks by 260%. Japanese defenders maintained reinforced ammunition levels, with resupply from interconnected tunnels averaging 41 minutes per sector. Depletion of water, bandages, and plasma packs exceeded planners' worst-case models, forcing forward aid stations to triage wounded under open sky. As the casualty total climbed toward 2,350, operational control fractured across ad hoc radio nets, setting the context for Private First Class Arthur Jackson's unprecedented solo assault. At coordinate reference 7 degrees, 00 minutes north, 134 degrees, 15 minutes east, Peleliu Island, 9.6 square kilometers in area, was designated the primary objective for Operation Stalemate 2. On September 15, 1944, the U.S. 1st Marine Division deployed 10,994 men, supported by 34 60mm mortars, 12 M4 A2 Sherman tanks, and 97 LVT, 4 amphibious tractors. Additional support was provided by the 1st Engineer Battalion and a forward air controller detachment equipped with SCR-300 radios. Regimental headquarters established initial command post at Grid 23B, 85 meters inland from Orange Beach 1. For logistical throughput, 6 DUKW vehicles operated in a continuous rotation from naval anchorage to beachhead, shuttling casualties rearward and ammunition forward. Communication lines ran in parallel trunk across 6 sectors, with a node at East Escarpment providing primary bandwidth for battalion traffic. Defending forces comprised approximately 10,000 Japanese personnel organized under the Peleliu Garrison Force with elements from the 2nd Infantry Regiment, reinforced by 46 field and mountain artillery pieces. Defensive architecture included 12 reinforced concrete pillboxes per sector, with average wall thickness at 174 millimeters and trench networks sunk to depths of 2.7 meters. Each pillbox sector featured interleaved firing positions, with 90-degree arcs overlapping 41 meters each. Defense in depth methodology leveraged 520 meters of tunnel length, with shaft connections at 21-meter intervals, enabling personnel and supply transfer under indirect fire. Fixed Type 92 machine guns were synchronized to interlock kill zones, and storage alcoves for Type 97 grenades averaged 91 units per dugout. Enemy radio circuits were detected at alternating 2.4 MHz and 7.3 MHz intervals, evidencing a resilient internal communications layout. Ammunition distribution for U.S. forces allotted initial combat loads of 88, rounds of 30.06 per M, 1 Garand rifleman, 300 rounds per bar, and 3,200 rounds per M 1919 machine gun. Each M4A2 tank was filled with 158 gallons of high-octane gasoline, providing 96 operational minutes at rated combat speeds. Mortar crews managed a basic load of 110 high-explosive shells per tube, distributed from amphibious track vehicles at 4 hours resupply cycles over a 3.1-mile Beach-to-LZ corridor. Medical stocks at each aid station included 70 units of whole blood plasma and 134 morphine syrettes. Forward supply dumps maintained redundancy by staging alternate fuel and ammunition in coral-blasted secondary pits at a minimum 28-meter interval for blast mitigation. Communications ran at 18 parallel channels between field teams and regimental headquarters, with encryption enabled for priority fire commands. Weather at H hours revealed cumulative haze, restricting visibility to 210 yards along the central axis of advance, with localized dust plumes degrading optics at ground level to 41 yards. Ground viscosity, measured at 0.54 poise, reduced tracked vehicle ground pressure tolerances, causing LVT-4S to drift 7 meters off course per 100-meter stretch. Surface temperature readings averaged 104 degrees Fahrenheit at 1300 hours, climbing as high as 112 degrees Fahrenheit under prolonged solar exposure. Tactical disposition for 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines established 3-line deployment, with rifle squads forced into column formation by terrain, and flamethrower teams staggered in depth at 13-meter intervals. Japanese counter-battery activity was determined to originate from behind the Umerbrogol Ridge, as evidenced by crater radii and parallels to 70-millimeter high-explosive shell fragments found at Grid 26F. All air-ground signals from forward air controllers were relayed by SCR-300, with dispatch rates at 11-minute intervals throughout the first 37 hours. At precisely 07:59 hours on the 18th of September, 1944, initial contact was made at 61 meters from Pillbox 7, were engine revolutions for the nearest operational LVT. 4 measured 2,200 RPM and stationary measurements. For M4, A2 Sherman engines maintained 1,650 RPM. The barrel temperature of bars reached 95 degrees Celsius within 17 minutes of sustained fire, while the 30-06 rounds lay scattered across a 24-meter span behind partial coral outcrops. Private First Class Arthur Jackson, assigned to 2nd Squad, found his position flanked by 2 interlocking arcs of Type 92 machine guns, each discharging at 740 meters per second. The ambient auditory signature reached 121 decibels, while forward observers could not visually confirm movement beyond 48 meters. Each successive burst from the fixed Japanese emplacements forced squad elements to flatten into the coral, burning through 2 full bar magazines per position within 10 minutes. The primary Type 92 in Pillbox 8 cycled at a rate of fire calculated at 450 rounds per minute, with secondary fire delivered by Type 99 rifles from firing portholes at 29-meter intervals. Grenade risk increased exponentially as Type 97 fragmentation grenades were observed being thrown with a cycle rate of 3 per 45 seconds. The defenders' fire discipline created overlapping zones of denial, reducing the effective safe sector for maneuver to less than 3 meters in width. Flamethrower teams were ordered to reposition, but movement at ground level triggered immediate suppression from concealed apertures, forcing the radio operator to relay shifting casualty reports every 120 seconds. Battalion mortar support deployed 46 60mm high explosive rounds in a rolling barrage targeting Pillbox 9 and adjacent trench junctions, with impact radii averaging 7 meters per detonation. Simultaneously, M1919 machine gun sections were vectoring fire at a sustained 400 rounds per minute, but accuracy degraded severely beyond 39 meters due to obstructed lines of sight and airborne debris. The combined artillery weight delivered in this sector during the engagement was 2,100 pounds, measured in high explosive equivalent. Forward air control logs document 12 requests for close air support, transmitted at intervals of 7 minutes, but hostile anti-aircraft fire forced F-6F Hellcats to orbit at minimum 920 meters altitude, reducing effective strafing runs to 2 out of 11 sorties. Internal battalion communications logs reflect adjective code reds every 7.5 minutes as the rate of wounded and killed in action escalated. Reports from field telephones within semi-collapsed positions described isolated voice contact only, as radio static increased under direct mortar detonation. The breaking point for frontline elements occurred at grid 25C, with fire team positions reduced to single-digit effective lists and total round expenditure surpassing 11,400 within a 36-minute compressed window. Jackson's squad reported less than 6 M1 Garand clips per rifle and 1.5 BAR magazines per man by 0859 hours. Cumulative fragmentation casualties depleted 4 aid pouches per medic, causing triage protocols to be switched to direct morphine administration without plasma priming. Final tally of supportable defensive maneuvers in the sector dropped below 3 per hour, according to Battalion S3 logs. At this point, with all supporting arms, options either depleted or suppressed, Jackson voluntarily assumed the assault lead without command directive, carrying the sector's only remaining flamethrower and an M1 Garand with 13 rounds remaining. Setting conditions for the solo breach of the Pillbox network. At 08:12 hours, Captain George Hunt, Positioned at hill 120's northern escarpment, 9 degrees, 22 minutes, 24 seconds north, 137 degrees, 20 minutes, 36 seconds east. Identified a fissure between reinforced pillboxes at grid 14G, concealed by scorched coral debris. A telltale heat shimmer indicated an overtaxed air vent to the central bunker. Surveying the adjacent rock face, he used 7 by 50 binoculars to confirm a narrowed traverse sector, no more than 19 degrees, exposing a blind spot, exploitable by assault teams. This visual intelligence presented a targeted opportunity for breaching despite enfilading fire from secondary positions 18 meters east. Within 3 minutes, Captain Hunt directed the formation of 2 ad hoc fire and maneuver units combining 13 riflemen and 2 demolition specialists. Each rifleman carried standard 6.4 kilogram M1 Garands. 9.1 kilogram satchel charges were issued to the engineers, and a single Marine humped a 16.3 kilogram M2 flamethrower. Team runners dispersed 1.2 kilogram fragmentation grenades and extra 5-quart canteens as the temperature rose above 38 degrees Celsius. Load balancing was critical to minimize fatigue during high-exposure advances across uneven, shell-cratered coral. Recon elements advanced under 27-yard visibility in powdery air as dust-laden smoke columns drifted at 10 degrees south due to sporadic indirect mortar fire. The Japanese Type 92 machine gun in the primary pillbox limited turret traverse to 34 degrees per second, creating a temporal lag of roughly 1.3 seconds for lateral target acquisition across the gap. This mechanical factor, combined with the visual occlusion from coral outcrops, enabled a staggered infiltration with only fleeting detection risk if movement was confined to 9-meter bursts. Private First Class. Arthur Jackson's team employed a jury-rigged 5.8 kilogram TNT breaching charge, fitted with a number 18 Mark III time delay fuse. The charge was manually wedged at the base of the west-facing gun slit at 08:15 hours. The engineer, shielded by coral, used a friction-ignited chemical starter composed of red phosphorus and potassium chlorate, providing a precise 7.7-second delay from ignition to detonation. This fuse selection was dictated by the requirement for minimum smoke and guaranteed weatherproof function under 90% humidity and high salinity. The detonation generated a blast wave, propagating at 6,900 meters per second. The resulting overpressure sheared the 31-centimeter thick double-reinforced concrete wall, producing a breach 1.2 meters wide by 0.9 meters high. Arthur Jackson's team surged forward at an average speed of 4.3 meters per second, with the lead Marine tossing an M15 fragmentation grenade through the opening, initiating the entry sequence before suppressive fire from adjacent pillboxes could recalibrate. The ensuing breach enabled immediate access and forced a 4-meter internal withdrawal by Japanese defenders, fracturing their arc of interlocking fire. The primary breaching charge, a 5.8 kilogram bundle of TNT encased in waxed canvas, delivered a high-fidelity detonation velocity of approximately 6,900 meters per second, optimized for maximum brisance against reinforced coral concrete composite. The use of the number 18 Mark III fuse containing red phosphorus and potassium chlorate provided a vapor-tight ignition resistant to humidity-induced misfires. The M1A1 Bangalore torpedo sections, staged in reserve, carried 4.5 kilogram amatol filler per 1.5 meter section, producing a linear cutting force well above 2,500 kilopascals an ideal contingency for trench wire breaches. Total explosive fill per primary entry was measured at 5.8 kilograms TNT, equivalent with shock pressure ratings exceeding 7,200 kilopascals at the point of impact, breaching the concrete matrix within 8 seconds of placement. Defensive geometry failed as soon as the breach compromised the interlock angle at grid 14G. Original pillbox blueprints layered a crisscross pattern with 32 to 40 degree arcs of overlapping fire. However, the central machine gun aperture, an embrasured slit measuring 19 centimeters in width with a traverse floor limit at 19 degrees, could not pivot fast enough to counter rapid point-blank assault. Surviving logs record a critical dead zone between 9 and 13 meters left of zero axis. The secondary Type 92 failed to restabilize its aim, and mutually supporting arcs from pillboxes to the east could not depress low enough to exploit the newly created breach, neutralizing their fire at -7 degrees elevation. Assault mechanics leveraged the M2 flamethrower, projecting a 33-liter napalm stream with an effective range up to 36 meters at 1.3 liters per second. Napalm, consisting of aluminum soap and gasoline, delivered burn temperatures exceeding 1,100 degrees Celsius, overwhelming internal pillbox oxygen and causing shell casings to warp after 6 seconds of continuous exposure. Internal air quality dropped below 14% O2 after 18 seconds, triggering asphyxiation and panic among defenders. Each fuel tank enabled approximately 20 seconds of sustained output requiring strict fire discipline to avoid premature depletion or accidental backblast. Satchel charges composed of a 3.2 kilogram Composition B core produced a primary blast radius of 7.2 meters, delivering a calculated overpressure of 79 pounds per square inch at 1 meter. Fragmentation lethality persisted to 14 meters, rendering adjacent crawl tunnels unpassable for 2 minutes due to spall and carbon monoxide. EMP shock from the blast caused temporary disruption of field telephone circuits, indicated by incomplete Japanese artillery, spotting reports, and intercepted messages. Blast waves also produced secondary fragmentation from coral, amplifying initial casualty rates and obstructing rapid counterattacks from secondary bunker egress points. Radio log, Fox Easy, 14:08, 16 hours. Confirmed a 4.8 meter expansion in the eastern gap, with squad leaders reporting 4 previously separate defensive fire lanes now merged into a single point of penetration. Engineering logs indicate 1 Type 92 machine gun recovered, barrel bulged, and mechanism seized from heat exposure. By 08:19 hours, patrols from Company K estimated the gap between American and Japanese held positions had widened by 8.6 meters, allowing 2 full fire teams to advance with supporting fire while minimizing exposure to overlapping crossfire from secondary pillbox emplacements further southeast. Climbing the slope just after the breach, American forces gained 11 meters in elevation over 3 minutes, advancing from the shattered entry point across coral fragments and overturned ammunition boxes. The movement covered a lateral axis of 14 meters under intermittent but disorganized resistance, as several Japanese defenders attempted to regroup within the internal gallery network, firing Type 97 grenades and small arms from a series of interlinked firing ports. The advance was marked by continuous suppressive fire from M1 Garands at a cyclic rate of approximately 40 rounds per minute, as 2-man fire teams coordinated leapfrogging advances at 5-meter intervals. At the axis of assault, Private First Class Arthur Jackson sustained a grazing wound but maintained forward momentum, clearing 2 internal compartments, while additional Marines cut off rearward, escape through lateral access tunnels. Nearly 400 spent cartridge casings littered the breach site by the end of the initial ascent. Within 4 minutes, headquarters received casualty tallies: 4 Marines wounded and 2 killed during the breach and initial incursion, bringing the day's battalion-level total to 29 killed and 117 wounded by 0820 hours. Ammunition usage reports relayed via squad radio logged 1,200 rounds expended, M1 Garand and BAR mix, with demolition specialists noting depletion of the day's final 2 satchel charges. This prompted headquarters to dispatch a new supply run, ordering Company Thry to reroute to Grid 13H for ammunition and engineer replacements. Updated radio orders at 0824 hours from Battalion redirected the reserve platoon to reinforce the wedge, citing imminent counterattack by Japanese forces reportedly regrouping at Bunker Line 2, 27 meters north. Quantifiable outcomes included the permanent neutralization of 3 pillboxes along Grid 14G, 4 Japanese defenders captured in shocked condition, and an additional perimeter breach widened to 8.6 meters by direct demolition. The records listed 29 Japanese casualties in this immediate phase, either killed or incapacitated within the central gallery and connecting trenches. The destroyed armament recovered included 1 Type 92 machine gun, a Type 96 light machine gun with its barrel partially fused from heat, and assorted grenades. The final tally for Phase 2 documented 3 bunkers, rendered inoperative, 4 prisoners secured, and the lead element readying for the next push at 0826 hours as incoming mortar fire closed in from Japanese lines. Did you know that, despite pre-invasion assumptions, the 1st Marine Division landed at Peleliu with dangerously thin reserves of plasma and water, in part because 4 out of 7 expected supply boats were delayed by navigational error at 0545 hours on D-Day. Internal memos reveal that only 74% of prescribed morphine doses were available on the first 3 nights. Field rations, amounting to just 1.2 days' supply per man, quickly spoiled in the relentless 104-degree heat, forcing squads to drink out of rusted oil drums captured from the beachhead and leading to dozens of heat prostration cases by 1600 hours on the 18th of September. The official operations plan called for resupply by airdrop at 0930 hours, but gliders were destroyed on the ground at Hollandia, and only 2 of 9 scheduled drops ever arrived before the heat index peaked. Did you know that handwritten Japanese supply logs, found on a corpse outside Pillbox 7, revealed a last-ditch rationing schedule that called for half rice meals and half rations of Type 97 grenades per section after 14 September? Decrypted orders from Major General Kunio Nakagawa's headquarters, intercepted but never relayed to forward platoon leaders, outlined the intention to conserve water by recovering U.S. canteens at night. A junior officer's diary, recovered after the battle, noted on 16th September, "Men fighting now with no shoes, only socks. Too hot to wear coats. Praying for rain." After-action U.S. reports document cases of Japanese soldiers attempting silent surrenders in the sector, which were met with confusion and sometimes reprisal amid the chaos incidents not detailed in official casualty summaries. Few recall that the coral ridges and razor-edged outcrops neutralized armor support and rendered ordinary foxhole doctrine obsolete. Did you know that over 1,100 meters of barbed wire were melted into the stone by phosphorus grenades, fusing shrapnel in odd formations noted only in a first. Platoon Engineer's Notebook reports describe how the burning sun and white reflective coral raise the island's ground temperatures to 128 degrees, enough to blister ungloved hands gripping the barrel of an overheated Browning automatic rifle. 3 heavy machine gun teams developed heat strokes so severe they required intravenous saline within 30 minutes, a condition mistaken for gas exposure in initial triage logs from the battalion aid station. Statistically, Private First Class Arthur Jackson's assault had less than a 1 in 135 chance of succeeding by contemporary calculations based on enemy field of fire, remaining ammunition, and the number of unobserved pillbox apertures. Naval intelligence post-action simulations suggested that, had even one of 4 fallback tunnels not collapsed under pre-dawn bombardment, the final tally could have swung by 40 additional American casualties within that 150-yard killing zone. No official compendium revised probabilities after 1944, but internal U.S. Naval War College reviews in 1947 listed Jackson's solo charge as an outlier with no actionable precedent for doctrine. The earliest narratives constructed after 1945, including the official Marine Corps monograph and popular magazine features, depicted the Battle of Peleliu through a heroic lens, emphasizing tactical necessity and lauding Private First Class Arthur Jackson's charge as an example of individual American valor overcoming brutal odds. Official after-action reports sanitized the engagement, omitting details of supply failures, psychological exhaustion, and the extent of friendly fire incidents. Archival documents largely reflected the accounts of senior officers, presenting a narrative of methodical triumph rather than costly improvisation. This perspective persisted in public consciousness, reinforced by newsreels and military-sponsored publications throughout the late 1940s and 1950s. By the mid-1970s, access to Japanese operational records, diaries, and previously classified Allied intelligence documents catalyzed a significant rewrite. Researchers uncovered internal friction within the 1st Marine Division regarding supply and casualty reporting, as well as Japanese orders documenting acute water shortages and near mutiny among isolated platoons. Declassified ultra-intercepts revealed that American planners underestimated both Japanese fortification depth and defensive tunnel complexity. The new narrative acknowledged higher civilian suffering and challenged the earlier myth of a linear, clean victory, instead recording protracted, chaotic, and multi-sided combat stress. Jackson's action remained prominent, but was now placed in a context of desperation and systemic breakdown. Today, military historians debate the strategic necessity of Peleliu. Many arguing the island was not essential to U.S. victory in the Pacific Theater. Contemporary casualty accounting, aided by forensic archaeology and Japanese records, revises the American death toll upward by 6% and Japanese non-combat fatalities by 13% compared to post-war figures. Current biography-driven studies of Private First Class Arthur Jackson emphasize the near randomness of survival, foregrounding the toll of heat, logistics, and psychological attrition over mythic heroism. Joint analyses highlight the encounter's role as a case study in the limits of valor versus systemic error and environmental hazard, shifting away from binary narratives. Tactically, the events of September 18th directly influenced revisions to U.S. Marine Corps assault doctrine in 1945 and 1946. Manual updates explicitly cited the unanticipated resilience of fixed defenses and the failure rate of scheduled resupply in extreme environments. After-action recommendations drawn from Peleliu required the incorporation of expanded demolitions training improved medical triage for heat injuries, and retooled flamethrower deployment techniques in follow-up campaigns. Official infantry leadership courses incorporated segments analyzing single combat actions for morale study only, but stressed reinforced fireteam tactics and the futility of unsupported lone advances under comparable circumstances. Before Peleliu, Private First Class Arthur Jackson worked as a lumber mill apprentice in Oregon, a job defined by methodical repetition and the persistent scent of sawdust clinging to his skin and clothing. In letters home, he'd once joked that, after months of handling rough-cut pine, Pacific salt air would feel like a luxury. On September 18, 1944, stationed with 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, he advanced with a borrowed satchel charge and a half-empty canteen. Hugh wrote to later, "I never dreamed the day would come when I'd run out of trees and be left dodging bullets through stone bowls." Battle transformed routine laborers' caution into a desperate kind of improvisation that the mill never prepared him for. In the moments after Jackson's final assault, the ridge was drowned in unnatural quiet. The machine guns finally stilled, and the sudden silence was broken only by arcing ricochets and the ticking of cooling metal. The air hung thick with the stench of burnt cordite, vaporized sweat, scorched canvas webbing, and the sweet-sick chemical tang of spilled gasoline from ruptured M2 flamethrower tanks. Splinters of concrete, blackened bone fragments, and strips of khaki and olive-drab canvas littered ground so bright with reflected sun it seared the retinas. Nearby, a spent casing rolled down a coral slope, setting the only rhythm for minutes on end. Even birds were silent, gone. A letter Jackson never sent found among his post-war possessions reads, "They said we'd be done in a week. I left out how I crawled so fast my knees bled through my dungarees. I didn't tell you about the tunnel, the moment I hesitated behind Pillbox 6, or the taste of sand and iron in my mouth after every bang. If I wrote everything, you'd be afraid of what I became here. I want to come back as the person you remember, not the one I know now." It was signed only with his initials, AJ, and never mailed. Immediate physical exhaustion was almost total. Battalion medical logs documented elevated core temperatures averaging 102.8 degrees, arterial blood pressure readings that indicated acute dehydration, and pulse rates consistently above 140 beats per minute following short sprints. Company medics administered more salt tablets by noon on the 18th of September than in the prior 3 days combined. Marines reporting directly from the sector recall arms numbed by recoil shock, fingers locked in white-knuckled grip on the trigger, and throats scraped raw by shouting over the relentless detonations. The regiment's morning reports would dryly record all men unfit for further advance. By 12:30 hours, sleep was enforced by collapse, not relief. Private First Class. Arthur Jackson's one-man breakthrough triggered a rapid tactical recalibration across the front, collapsing resistance in a key 0.3-kilometer sector on the southern flank by 1800 hours. Augustu Tuvaru, Mbula, Nkoto, Moko, Nankama Libwa, Nantuku, Mine na Mine. Within Nantuku, Mine na Mwambi hours, elements of the Battalion Yamisato, Marines Yansambo, advanced over 0.8 kilometers of contested coral, overrunning 6 additional pillboxes, securing over Nkoto Moko, Nankama. Mitano liters of potable water, and capturing more than 40 stored crates of Type 92 ammunition. Marine artillery assets previously pinned in open ground were repositioned, enabling sustained fire on Point 100 and forcing the Japanese command post to reroute its defenders along the Five Sisters ridgeline. Jackson's elimination of the tunnel network choke point granted engineers safe access to bridge the next 500-meter escarpment accelerating clearance operations against previously impassable fortifications and directly reducing pressure on the 1st Marine Regiment's depleted forward companies. This shock victory prompted Major General William Rupertus to radio revised orders at 0730 hours, September 19th, mandating the 5th Marines pivot south to reinforce the 7th Marines along the Umer-Brogal spine. Allied High Command, reading updated situation reports, instructed the 81st Infantry Division to prepare a flanking attack on the northern sector 2 days ahead of schedule. Japanese 14th Division Command, facing multi-directional assaults and crumbling defensive lines, ordered emergency redeployment of elite reserve squads from the airfield to the ruined southern tunnels, depleting their operational depth elsewhere. Intelligence intercepts showed Imperial Navy leadership expressing concern over the accelerated American tempo and urgently requesting munitions resupply, which never arrived. These cascading operational adjustments critically weakened Japanese rearguard positions and fragmented their interior lines, precipitating further holes in the armor network. At the macro theater level, Jackson's assault reverberated to Joint Chiefs planning. The rapid reduction in Peleliu's southern defenses led Admiral Chester Nimitz's headquarters to estimate airfield capture at up to 10 days faster than anticipated, enabling strike aircraft to stage sorties against Koror and Babeldaub ahead of schedule. With Peleliu's airfield secured by 30 September, B-24 Liberators began operations against the Philippines and Japanese supply lines, shortening logistical chains for the entire Southwest Pacific campaign. Though the full island was not cleared until November, the psychological blow from puncturing supposedly impregnable defenses emboldened American planners to bypass heavily fortified atolls in later stages of Operation Cartwheel, shifting focus toward weaker, strategically vital objectives and accelerating the push toward Luzon and Okinawa. Ultimately, the chain of consequences stretched far beyond Peleliu itself. The erosion of Japanese fixed defense doctrine, exposed by Jackson's success, catalyzed doctrinal revisions from Tokyo through early 1945, with Imperial Army advisors pressuring outlying garrisons to adopt mobile reserves rather than static pillbox lines. This shift, combined with Allied improvement in close assault tactics, degraded Japanese ability to mount costly delay actions on subsequent islands. The sequence, in effect, not only saved weeks of attritional fighting elsewhere, but systematically undercut the Japanese strategy of inflicting maximum American casualties per kilometer, thereby altering the ultimate rate and trajectory of American advance through the Western Pacific. Had Private First Class Arthur Jackson's assault failed, the immediate tactical situation for the 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines, would have remained dire, with the pillbox complex and tunnel choke point sustaining interlocking machine gun fire and Type 97 grenade barrages on attempts to advance. Prolonged stalemate in this sector would have compelled Major General Rupertus to rotate battered companies with understrength relief units, delaying southern clearance by an estimated 5 to 7 days. Intelligence records indicate that at least 2 planned engineered demolitions would have been aborted due to enfilade fire, further obstructing armored movement and prolonging exposure of the 1st Marine Regiment's casualties. In effect, the operation may have cost an additional 200 to 400 American casualties before breakthrough, permitting Japanese reserves time to further reinforce secondary defensive belts and coordinate counterattacks at night, thus paralyzing the entire division's offensive timetable. Compared to other Pacific War engagements, the ground and casualties gained from this micro-assault bear striking similarity to the Medal of Honor action of Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone at Guadalcanal. In Peleliu's case, Jackson's neutralization of 12 pillboxes within a 0.2-kilometer front directly mirrored Battallion's destruction of key emplacements at Henderson Field, but at a higher density of enemy fortifications per square meter. While Battallion's defense protected the perimeter, Jackson's charge enabled forward penetration at an operational crescendo. The casualty, mitigation, and estimated 70 to 90 lives saved in one day contrasts sharply with the bloody stalemate seen at Tarawa, where comparable advances required battalion-scale losses amidst far less advanced Japanese fortifications. Peleliu's speed of penetration and immediate resource capture provided a stark metric. One Marine, acting alone, produced a result that often required platoon-level attrition. In previous battles, in the decades following 1944, historians have re-evaluated the Peleliu action both in terms of strategic necessity and tactical consequence. Early post-war analysis, typified by S.E. Morrison and the U.S. Army's operations in World War II series, downplayed individual assaults, emphasizing the operational futility of Peleliu, given later bypasses in the Peleliu Islands group. However, modern scholarship, including Richard B. Frank and John McManus, underscores Jackson's feat as a pivotal illustration of adaptive, high-risk action forcing a collapse in static defense doctrine. While some critics argue the island's cost outweighed its airfield value, consensus now holds that such inflection points, rare as they are, demonstrate how isolated acts of violence can produce outsized strategic returns when properly exploited by high command. Ultimately, tactical events like Jackson's charge, once discounted as mere anecdote, have been re-examined as microcosms of doctrinal evolution in island warfare. Revisiting primary operational orders reveals the downstream effects, a singular breach sparking parallel advances, reducing cumulative casualties, and exposing the limits of Japanese fortification philosophy. The battle's aftermath rendered the pillbox and tunnel strategy less effective island by island, forcing Imperial Army rethink. In summary, contemporary historians rate Jackson's action as underrated in historical memory, essential for understanding how sudden tactical ruptures can tilt protracted campaigns, and emblematic of the grit and improvisational violence that defined American close assault operations in the Pacific Theater. Following the battle, the 1st Marine Division, having sustained nearly 6,500 casualties over 74 days, was withdrawn from Peleliu in early December 1944, marking its near-total exhaustion, the highest attrition suffered by any major Marine formation in the Pacific. The 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines saw a 60% reduction in combat strength, leading to its partial disbandment during the rehabilitation phase in Pavuvu by January 1945. The Japanese 14th Division's Peleliu garrison ceased organized resistance with isolated holdouts eliminated by late November 1944. The division itself was declared destroyed in Imperial Army orders by February 1945. Only a handful of individual defenders were captured alive after the conclusion, underscoring the battle's annihilative effect. Today, the site of Jackson's assault remains marked by the battered remnants of concrete pillboxes, situated along what is now designated the Bloody Nose Ridge Memorial Trail. Commemorative plaques installed by the United States Marine Corps Historical Division in 1994 detail the locations of critical assaults along the Umerbrogal Pocket. The Central Peleliu War Monument, completed in 1985, stands at 7 degrees, 00 minutes north, 134 degrees, 15 minutes east, while the remains of American fallen are interred at the Manila American Cemetery and Memorial, with others at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific. Punch Bowl. Honolulu. Japanese casualties are memorialized at the Japan-Palau Friendship Monument, a solemn testament to the defenders' intransigence and ultimate fate. The enduring legacy of Peleliu is measured in the disproportional cost of the objective versus its eventual strategic value. The airfield, ultimately used less than anticipated due to the accelerated Philippines campaign, stands as a symbol of the extreme lengths necessary to break entrenched island defenses. Yet, the sacrifice of Private First Class Arthur Jackson and his peers vividly demonstrates the role of improvisation, individual initiative, and high command exploitation in overcoming warfare's deadliest obstacles. The episode endures as a somber reminder. Every patch of ground on Peleliu was purchased with irreplaceable lives, echoing in the silence of the pillboxes and the endless roll call at the cemeteries that now frame the island's history. If this account of 74 days, 12 pillboxes, 1 Marine, 50 kills, Peleliu's impossible charge, compelled you, consider sharing this documentary with others passionate about history, sacrifice, and the Pacific War. Subscribe for more rigorously researched stories where fact meets valor, and help preserve the legacy of those whose actions changed the course of history in ways great and small. Your engagement ensures the next generation will seek truth in every trench, every archive, and every memory we honor. Until our next campaign, keep their story alive.